Hello, hello. Welcome to Golden Shower Sunday stream on July 16th, 2023. Trucking along. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Hex.
Hello, internet.
Yeah, Hex is back from a Twitter ban because Twitter's down the shitter again. And then today we're joined by Legalman, which I don't know if I could call you Lee. I prefer Legalman. Is that all right?
Either way.
Like it. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I was trying, I think I found you pretty early on during the whole COVID shit show, and I was so thankful. And then you were just kind of voice of reason, so I was always a big fan.
Well, good. I'm glad. It's always good to stick together. It's insane out there.
And it just kept getting crazier and crazier and crazier. And now they're just like, we're not going to talk about it. We're just going to move on. I'm like, no.
And we're just going to pretend like we didn't want half the population excommunicated from society because they did a vaccine that might kill them.
God, what a world we lived in.
But, that probably won't kill them at that.
Who even knows anymore? You can't give everybody Advil without there being bad things. So even if the product is fine, you can't give it to everybody, right? Anyways, I was hoping, man, you could explain it because I know you. I don't know if you have been going so hard on nullification lately, but I remember you used to a lot on your shows.
Well, I go through phases. I mean, I go hard on a lot of the jury nullification and parts of. I always reference it, but I mean, I talk about other things. There's other issues, and the show I put out today to the public happens to include a large portion of jury nullification on it. So it's really the only way we have as a citizen, so-called, to have any real effect, to have a real say. And people don't understand it because they think of it as this kind of kookery, if they've ever even heard of it. And they don't understand it's actually a political tool. It's not really just something that you use in the justice system. That's the thing. Obviously, the justice system is laughably 1984 named, and there's no justice going on in the justice system. But to the extent you want to try to help people get justice, then you need to go down there and you need to get on those juries. I know a lot of people who hate the system. They won't go get on the jury. They just throw the stuff out. I don't blame them. I get it. People don't want to participate. But if you want to actually try to make any kind of difference, go down there and get on the jury. And, be very, very careful about exposing and telling anybody your views before you get seated into the jury. And then, again, keep your mouth shut. Because the system does not want people using jury nullification because it's so powerful.
Okay. You just show up and say, I'm not gonna make a choice on this.
What do you mean?
On the if they're guilty or not guilty,
Well, I mean, once you get seated as a juror, then you go through this very formalized process when you're back there and they have all these questions and you're sitting around with 11 other people. Sometimes they have alternates depending on how the size of the trial. You might have a couple of alternates in there. And, people talk a little bit. You don't normally talk about the case. They kind of instruct you not to kind of talk about the case for the most part until the case is concluded. So you're stuck with these people depending on how long the trial is. And the likelihood that you're going to sway somebody over to your side of jury nullification. That'd be a very dangerous proposition. You don't need to, because the purpose of it is that the decisions have to be unanimous. And so since they have to be unanimous, you don't have to convince anybody else. You can just sit there and then you go back and they take the vote, you vote not guilty. That's it. If you think the law is crap, you think the prosecutor's a liar, you think the cops are liars, you think the law is a made-up thing, that there's not actually a crime involved in any form or fashion, you vote not guilty. And if nobody else joins you and they're all voting guilty, well, then you have a hung jury. And you're going to have to stand your ground. And this is where most people collapse. And they give in, they get scared, and they go ahead and turn and vote guilty. And there's a lot of TV shows and movies that it's always about the other, that there's some guy who's going to convince everybody and they're eventually turn everybody around, 12 angry men. Next thing you know, the guy's walking out to get that's all fantasy. That crap doesn't happen. What happens is people who kind of want to vote not guilty, who feel a little bit guilty about voting not guilty because they try to make you feel guilty about not just trusting anything the cops say, or the judge is supposedly this fantastically important figure. You're supposed to listen to everything he says as though it's manna from heaven. And then you're just supposed to go along and do your duty and convict this person and send them off to the state prison. That's the way they try to present it. And there'll be tons and tons of people inside most juries who will also kind of pressure people in that same way. It's inevitable. And so you have to stand your ground. And the thing about it is jury nullification works on the civil side too. When a government comes in with these phony baloney civil charges and is trying to find people and take money from them and shut them down from doing all these things they have every right to do, you can just say, no, judgment for the defendant. And again, there's nothing they can do. They have to go and retry the whole case if they can. And in most of the time, even if they want to try to retry them, they don't have the budget. They have other pulls. And what ends up happening as a practical matter is that they massively reduce the charges or the civil penalties and everything else. And they cut a way, way better deal. And the people probably don't get off with nothing, but on the criminal side, they may reduce it down to something reasonable, give them deferred adjudication. If the people are decent people, then they can accomplish it, get out, and they don't have a conviction. On the civil side, they'll massively slash their so-called demands. And it might be worth it to the person since they don't know in all likelihood about jury nullification or why it is they got a hung jury. They're sitting around worried that they could at any time be dragged back through the system and then get a judgment against them or guilty. Most people, once they have a hung jury, they probably end up taking the greatly reduced deal that's offered to them. So it's not perfect, but you do make a big difference. And, it's got to start somewhere. And once you start getting a lot of hung juries, then the people will start asking questions and catching on. And then they'll feel a lot stronger in their position that, yeah, I got a hung jury here. It's true, I'll make it charged, try it again, and maybe they'd win it. But maybe once you start getting confidence, especially if you get a hung jury, we say 2 or 3 people saying no. Okay, now it's a lot more confident, right? But you only have one person holding out. You may feel a little less confident. But as I said many times, word will start to spread very, very quickly if your area starts pulling a lot of hung juries. And the system will start to collapse because the system cannot survive hung juries. It can't survive retrials. It just can't. It's already so backed up. You don't have to be able to get to the point where it's not guilty. You just have to hang them up in enough times where they'll just stop prosecuting, start making better offers. And as long as you keep hung jury, that thing will all correct itself very, very quickly.
Okay. So it's just tripping them up. And like you said, they are so unorganized anyways. So if you keep messing them up even more. I only did duty one time and it was so weird. I made it through, even though I said, I'm like, yeah, my partner used to be a cop. I said that stuff. And but then they put me on anyways. And it was the weirdest case. And then we had an alternate, but the alternate had to leave. And then someone else had to leave. And it was just, that one got thrown out anyway. So I was there all day for nothing. It was kind of fun when you're back there, but I can't see how I never got to the point where I had to, make a decision. So,
yeah. Well, a lot of trials, especially in federal court, they are actually fairly long trials. A lot of times you end up with complicated cases, these both on the civil and the criminal side. The stuff that actually gets tried is often more complicated. Or what you've got on the criminal side in federal court is that the people are basically looking at they're gone the rest of their lives or 10 years or 20 years. You got really no chance. They're not going to make a lower offer because they think they have such a great case. And the people have absolutely nothing to lose. And so they go ahead and try the case. It's like, oh, okay, that's fine. Since I'm going to get punished anyway, I might as well stay up here because a lot of times they may prefer the holding cells in federal court. It's like, okay, I'll make them waste time, spend a couple weeks more time. I'll be up here. And the other consideration is the opposite, which is that a lot of times people know they're guilty and they have, crap this and crap that. They got a bad offer, but they're actually very comfortable in prison. They spent a bunch of time in prison and they want to get back down to prison. They don't want to be held in the county facilities because a lot of times those are even more chaotic in big cities, as strange as that sounds. But those are people who are genuine criminals who don't care. I'm talking about people who are getting charged with a bunch of crap. They're not really criminals. They're being made into criminals, gun charges and phony baloney, minor drug charges, and even selling drugs. I don't care if someone wants to sell drugs. What do you think if you bust the people who sell drugs that no one's going to sell drugs? No, right. They've been busting people for selling drugs for 60 years. Guess what? There's still people selling drugs. And so you're always going to have people selling drugs. All that happens is you change up who it is that's selling drugs. And maybe you make them a little more expensive. Maybe you don't, but you're not going to get rid of it. It's a complete waste of time to criminalize behavior that's simply voluntary between people.
Yeah, and they just make new laws up with the flick of, like you said, the gun laws. The ATF can make you be a criminal overnight.
Gun laws, yeah. Illegal guns. Guns are legal. What do you mean illegal guns? It's just idiotic. Oh, well, you didn't pay their government tax. They don't have the right people selling them to you. There you go. Right, they're illegal guns. The government has guns everywhere. If you want to stop people from getting guns, the problematic people who have guns is all these government agents. Those are the people who are dangerous, who have all the damn guns, not the citizens. That's just completely turned on its head.
I know. I love when they say weapons of war. And I'm like, okay, a peaceful citizen doesn't go to war. So we should only give weapons of war to the people who actually do war, which is like bad.
Well, war is so ridiculous. I mean, literally every one of them is so just completely, it just, both sides are lying to their people almost every time. And, you get these nuclear weapons and the people are worried about that stuff. I wouldn't fire a nuclear weapon if they're even real, which I've got my doubts about that. But even if they are real and someone launched a nuclear strike against us, I'm not launching a nuclear strike against those people. That's ridiculous. I'm not a mass murderer. I mean, I don't support Joe Biden. I don't support Trump. Most people don't support these people. Well, I don't understand. Someone's going to be different over in some other country. Maybe they don't support the people. They haven't even done anything. What's the possible moral justification to send a so-called counterattack and kill millions of people? I don't get it. See, to me, it doesn't make sense. And so they always say, well, do you want to fight them over here or over there? I want to fight them over here. I don't want to fight them over there. I want to fight them over here. Let's see if they can get here. And if they starting some crap in my city, okay, all right, that's fine. They start paratrooping down like in Red Dawn or something. All right, well, then I can see who the enemy is and I'll go fight them. But until then, I don't believe one damn word about the enemy, this foreign enemy. And we need submarines and ballistic missiles and everything else to go basically just dump them on civilian populations and kill people by the millions. That's, I'm sorry, that's immoral. I'm not doing anything like that to protect my government. Nothing.
So are you going to see the Oppenheimer movie coming out then, I guess?
Oh, yeah, that one's hilarious. No, I don't see a lot of movies, and I won't be seeing that one. I mean, that's...
They're, like, pushing it so weird, too. Yeah. And, like, I mean, right. I don't know if they make him look like a good guy or what, but... Yeah. Well, I mean, apparently, I mean, if you even believe the stories, which I don't believe the generalized stories, but something was happening there. He was in charge of something. Was he a good guy, a bad guy? Who knows? We're never going to know, but... I know that they're telling that story in the movie, that the story they're telling in the movie is not true. That's the one thing I can know for sure. I can cross that one off the list as a possible legitimate narrative for what happened if they put it in a big movie like that. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to see it either, just only because we've been advertising it so much. And, like being on Twitter, especially the last couple of years, you see when they're doing these, like, when they're pushing things, when they're, like, throwing the words out there and the spells out there. Yeah. Why are they pushing this so hard? Why are they pushing this so hard? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, they got to keep that constant fear mongering, the concept that there's nuclear weapons and we're protecting ourselves against the so-called Chi-Coms, the Russians, or whatever it is we're supposedly protecting ourselves from. It's all part of that narrative, keep that fantasy going because there's so many questions that have been raised around nukes and they have a lot of weird issues and questions of whether they're not legitimate and can they really be used the way they claim. It's just a lot of questions around it. You go to those Chernobyl and all those animals are completely fine. I mean, things all back. Why aren't they all mutated and screwed up? Well, how's this possible? You go there and you show the Geiger counter off the scale and the people supposedly getting sick, but then the animals are fine. They're completely fine. It's like, how? I don't understand. How can they be fine over there? And why aren't they all mutated? Yeah, we're told that that's what would happen. No matter
That's what you're told, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're told. But then it's not happening. It's like, okay, so that's not happening. So what is happening? You can't have an honest discussion about it. Like everything else, you'll never get an honest discussion.
No, yeah, you can't anymore. You were never banned on Twitter, were you, Legal Man? You always had your account, right?
I've been suspended multiple times and had to change my handle from at U.S. Law Review to at U.S. Crime Review because someone had told me, and I was getting close, and I'm still close to being so-called suspended permanently or something. Even though I've never had a rules violation, they've never ever been able to bring one to me. They've suspended me many times. And I was told that if you do that, it kind of resets it. And I thought, well, it's worth trying because the only other option is not trying. And then I know what's down the path of this. And so I'm like, I'll try it. And I changed it and it didn't do anything. But, with Musk, I got suspended once and I appealed it. And that was the only time that an appeal of mine was ever responded to. And they, within like less than 24 hours, they reversed it. They didn't explain why it ever happened or why they reversed, but they did pull it. And I haven't been suspended again. But of course, the way I behave, the way I tweet, I'm never outside the rules, never have been, but I've been suspended many, many times.
Thanks, TT. Thanks, Hayden, too, for your thing. Yeah, Hex just had a week-long ban. I got my accounts back, but now, so the Libertarian Party Colorado's official account got banned with no explanation. So we actually had this the board had a special meeting yesterday because some lawyers had contacted us, and it sounds like that there might be an actual case, at least to write a letter towards Twitter or whatever. So we're going to try to see if that can help. But so I canceled my blue checks. Now I'm worried. I thought that was protecting me maybe a little bit, but now I'm like, I'm going to get banned again.
Yeah, there's a guy I follow, goes by Shads. He's like big in the whole gun Twitter thing. He got banned out of nowhere with no notice or anything. And he was also a Twitter Blue subscriber.
Really?
Yeah.
See, this is the part I don't understand about why the people can ever think that there's freedom of speech out there on these platforms. I mean, obviously, they're welcome to have whatever rules they want. Okay, they are. I agree. They are. Now, of course, we can argue about other things with the subsidies and all the different protections they get from Congress. But to the extent that they want to have rules, okay, have rules. The problem is I've read the rules. I read them very carefully and I don't violate the rules. And so they punish me without being in violation of the rules. That's the part that makes no sense to me. If they want to have rules, then have rules and apply the rules. But I see all these different accounts who are in clear violation of the rules all the time. And they have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people or millions of followers, and they're in gross violation of the rules, and absolutely nothing happens to them. And then I see people like me in my account where I know damn well I haven't violated the rules. They can't explain it, and they sanction me for a violation of rules. That's the problem with it. Not that they want to have rules. Have rules. Okay.
Not like I've seen people say like some of the most racist shit ever.
Yes.
Then you go report them and then they go, we didn't find any rules violation.
Right.
About?
Right. I just say if you want to have rules, then let's have rules. Okay, I agree. You promulgate rules there, and then if people go read them, but staying within them is useless. And the only reason they actually have rules is just as a cover story. To make it appear that they have rules. They don't actually have rules. The rules are that they suspend and ban people whenever they care to without reason, because there's no way to make them have to give you a reason. No way.
Yeah, that's what seemed when I kept getting banned. They would never like give an official reason half the time. So it was like, how can you even appeal to it if you don't even know? And
I got banned for jokes that were obvious jokes, and they weren't even jokes that could be misinterpreted. And I got banned one time, I guess suspended for simply referring to somebody who said, "Man, things are really falling apart," or they sent me something and said, "Oh yeah, it's really going off a cliff." They suspended me for 10 days for that, for supposedly encouraging self-harm. I'm like, dude, I'm talking about the situation going south. It's just not in any possible interpretation and encouragement to self-harm. And of course, I wouldn't get a response. And, the way they've set the rules up is that if you appeal the thing and they never respond to you, then you just stay suspended until such time as you cave. That they don't have to actually respond to you. Like they give you say a 7-day suspension. If you want to appeal that suspension, you can. And I used to do that, and they wouldn't respond to me, and it would just run past 7 days. I'd be at 8, 9, 10, 11. Well, yeah, because the so-called process hasn't occurred, which is they have to get back to you and tell you whether or not they're going to do. Well, if they never get back to you, well, you just sit in limbo forever. And I've known people inside who come back and talk to me on Twitter or in some of my Patreon or something, or in some way I find out about them, and they're like, oh yeah, that account of mine has been banned for months. I appealed it. I've never heard from them. So it's like a 3-day ban that turns into months and months and months that you can never get back in unless you simply concede that you had a violation, and then they let you back in after a week or 3 days. I mean, it's just Kafka-esque insanity that's going on.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I hate the having to delete stuff. And
Yeah.
I like on a couple of my accounts, I did it back in the day, and then I was like, "Damn it, I shouldn't have done that." And producer Paul was like, "Yeah, you shouldn't have done that."
Yeah, that one tweet I sent you last week, the one I had to delete that had literally nothing in it. I deleted it, and then like right after that, I should have tried to appeal that one at least because that was ridiculous.
Yeah, they're not making any. The fact is, like they're not telling people everything's being under violent. That's what the LP Colorado is under violent speech. So they're thinking it may have been there was like a meme with a gallows in it, or a whatchamacallit, you know, the blade that comes down.
Oh
And,
yeah, the guillotine.
Yeah, guillotine in it. And so they're like, you know, and then all these stupid like dorks were like, well, it's probably because of that, because that's violent and blah, blah, and like, but they're apparently like his treason's in the Constitution. Like you can't have treason. So they're saying maybe the rules, maybe Twitter's rules are even like it would be banning the Constitution, or I don't know how to explain it.
Well, the vast majority of stuff, one, all this violence being some kind of zero tolerance. These government spokesmen and accounts operate no problem. They advocate for massive amounts of violence all the time, and there's absolutely no problem with it. And it's completely absurd. And as far as treason goes, I mean, there was so much of that stupid crap with the Q and the treason and seditious this and that over and over. Like, dude, it's not treason. There's nothing they're doing that's treasonous. Trying to get control of the government is not treasonous. If that was, then running a campaign for a political office would be treasonous. You're trying to get control. Any type of election tampering would be treason because you're trying to get in illegally. It's like, dude, they're trying to get control of the government. They're not trying to overthrow the government. It says nobody is trying to overthrow the government. And so that's what treason is. Anybody can go look it up. I've sent it to countless people. I stopped a long time ago because I get sick and tired of telling people the same thing over and over again. And you know, obviously it's Twitter, social media. Vast majority of people aren't listening because the vast majority of accounts are fake anyway. They're trolls and bots, and they're not even legitimate. I think if you drained it all out of my so-called 50,000 followers, which I suspect is vast majority is crap, I'd say there's probably about 5,000 people in there who are like real people who I have decent amount of kind of interaction with over a 2 or 3 month period. That at least half of them are bots or just like some kind of troll account that's really not even a human being. And the rest of them are people that somehow pop in some form or fashion who operate multiple different accounts. I don't think that most of them are real. And I see it all the time. I see these accounts with hundreds of thousands of supposed followers. And I love to bust them because they're, you look at their actual Twitter account and the tweets they put out. It's like, dude, nobody even replies to you. Nobody likes you. Nobody retweets your stuff. There's impossible. You've got 350,000 followers and you get like 2 likes on a tweet. Like it's simply not possible. And you know, these people, they buy the account, they buy the different followers, and or they're a bot themselves. And the whole thing is their own bots following with fake stuff. I mean, the vast majority of all this social media is a massive show being put on by the AI kind of driven stuff. That's what it is.
No, I agree. Like even all these like the rage bait accounts from the left or right or whatever we're talking about, it's like it's almost like it's AI totally honed in on what exactly is going to get people to rage share it, or you know what I mean? Like it's all, they know what the fuck they're doing. Like
Yes.
they're
Oh,
really good
yeah.
they've been doing propaganda for a long time. So
Right. And they've got access to these massive, computers, and they have whole teams of people being paid extremely well, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're bringing multi-million-dollar consulting contracts, and they run all sorts of scenarios, and they you're never going to beat them at this game. That's never going to happen. Yeah, if less people understand the nature of the actual game going on, they're never going to be able to beat it. And of course, that's the entire job of constitutional conservatives in media and academia, is to make sure people never catch on to the real game, and they simply continue to do the same stupid kind of things with the voting and the check writing and the getting organized and staying informed and all this stuff that doesn't actually do anything. And and as long as you think those are solutions, well, okay, they've got you right where they want you.
yeah, I'm doing the whole political thing as a troll, kind of a little bit, like it's just
I
kind of
understand.
it's for fun, and I wanted to see what the process is like. And I'm such like I'm a totally normal person, totally normal working class person, right? And so it's like, let's see how easy it is to like get in government. And although it's worked out good for me, but that's just because of the whole Twitter. Like I had Twitter built up,
Well, this is what I'm saying. It can be used for all sorts of things. And at a local level, you can do all sorts of stuff. At a national level, you really can't do anything to move the needle. But to the extent anything can be used to raise awareness, and then that's fine. It's just that the people who are in it, who are delusional and imagine the system is what we've been told, that's never going to work. It's never going to accomplish anything.
Well, and even just see, like, even with the presidential stuff started up, you see how people like something flips in people's brains with the presidential elections, man. And that's all they care about. That's all they talk about. That's all they throw their weight behind. And it's like, that's the least impactful on like your life. I mean, it is and it isn't, obviously, but that's just wild.
It's so dumb to live in a country and imagine you're free where you're worried about what one guy is going to do. If one man can make this kind of difference in your life, you got a really big problem. I mean, that's the problem, not who it is. The idea that there's a situation where this single person who you'll never meet, you'll never have a conversation with, you'll have no input to, who you might completely disagree with, can then somehow get this massive control over your life and all these different things that go on in it. That's the part that blows my mind, that people can't see that, well, hold, that's actually the problem, not these other things.
Well, yeah, and then now like everyone's trying to, sorry to my MAGA audience, but like everyone's, well, it doesn't matter what Trump did during COVID because it was what your governors did, and blah, blah, blah. So then I'm like, okay, so that you care about local stuff then when you can skirt him of the responsibilities, but now it's our lifetimes that are dependent on this election. So, and I'm like, he fucked up. Like everything went wrong when if the president doesn't even have the power to like not let COVID happen, then what the fuck's the point?
Right. Well, if this election is so important, then how can it be important if when he was in there, he couldn't do anything? Oh, he couldn't because he'd have gotten, the press would have skewered him. Oh, they would have done this. Oh, there's a million excuses every single. Okay. So what's the point of worrying about getting him in there since he can't do anything when the chips are down anyway? It doesn't make any difference. Why bother worrying about it? You can't have it both ways, and these voters, they always want it both ways. They don't want to admit that the system moves in one direction. It's gone from a lot more freedom 250 years ago to almost no freedom. And it's never been a break where like, oh, they cleaned out a whole bunch of stuff and everything got way freer and they gutted the government for, remember that 40 years, it was completely gutted and had to slowly it's never happened. It's never going to happen. And when you are staring that in the face, it's simply preposterous to continue to talk about how voting for the president would somehow make a difference. They act like it's a big deal. You don't even have any constitutional right to vote for the president. None. Any state could simply take it away and just say, we don't have an open vote for the president. There'd be absolutely nothing that people could do about that. They could elect their so-called presidential electors any way they want. They could play a game of backgammon in their own state houses and designate the party who's going to play for each side. And whoever won, they'd be able to appoint all the presidential electors. And they could just laugh at the people. And the reason they don't do things that outrageous is because then the fraud would be exposed. See, then everybody would see, oh, okay, this is a complete scam. This whole voting thing, just sending millions and millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars and all this stupid crap. These guys walking around giving speeches, just lying about shit. Everyone would see it was fake. You have absolutely no constitutional right to vote for the president. Any state could also make it such that only people who have at least $10 million in liquid assets can vote. There'd be absolutely nothing unconstitutional about that. Nothing. You could just, any state could do it right now, but they don't do it, again, because they got to keep the charade going that these things are somehow this freedom machine. But when you just start looking at things like that, that's the way I try to show people how fake it is. You could have one Supreme Court justice. You could only have one up there. It could be Hunter Biden. There'd be absolutely nothing in the Constitution to prevent that. They could put an autistic kid.
Fine with that at this point.
Yes.
Let's see if I could do it.
They could put an autistic kid up there who's 15 years old, and that'd be the only Supreme Court justice you had. And then supposedly whatever he scribbles down in some kind of confused state, that's it. Now it's the law of the land. We all have to follow it. There's nothing. We have to go get a constitutional amendment. You get 75% of this. It's like, no, there's absolutely nothing in the Constitution prevents that. Nothing. Think how absurd it would appear to people if a situation like that actually exists. Then you could see it for what it actually is. But by dressing it up with the 9 jokers and the robes and acting like there's such fantastic this and that, the people are confused. See, they're fundamentally confused. And the way you strip it out, at least the way I attempt to try to strip, is just you strip it down to reductio ad absurdum and just show people what the Constitution would permit. It would permit that. A retarded human being could easily sit on the Supreme Court as the only justice, and that would be it. We'd have to listen to anything they said. That's what people agreed to with the freedom machine that they fought a war for. That doesn't make any sense. Nobody would agree to that. But that is the construction, the legal construction of the document. So you can just see that having negotiated lots of contracts and litigated tons of cases, nobody would ever allow in a provision like that with such an obvious glaring hole you can drive the Batmobile through. It's just preposterous. You're not going to have a system set up like that. You're not going to.
Can I get into city council and say no one in my district is going to vote for president? Never again.
There you go. You should run on that as your campaign promise. I promise to take the vote away from people in our state so they can see the scam for what it is.
Would that be so funny?
Well, it's not even just president. They could, in any state, could just say the only people who can vote for the state representatives are people who have $10 million in liquid assets. If you don't have $10 million in liquid assets in the state, you don't get to vote. There's nothing unconstitutional about that. Nothing. People are shocked when I tell them that, but that's just the facts. The Constitution speaks nothing to voting. Those are amendments. See, the amendments, they had to pass an amendment to give women the right to vote. They had to pass an amendment to make sure you couldn't discriminate against people who are under 18. You had to pass an amendment to supposedly give the black people the right to vote. Okay. All right. It's in there. There's nothing in there about money. There's nothing in there about it. They could pass an amendment that says, without an amendment, they could pass a law that says unless you're a 5th generation citizen of the state, you can't vote. There'd be nothing as long as they allowed people who are 18, women, blacks, minorities. They didn't limit it in any other way. There's nothing unconstitutional about it. How many people do you think know that? Right? Like 0.001%.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but back, around the time the country first got established, the only people who voted were wealthy landowners, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, every state was different. There were states that allowed blacks to vote. It wasn't racially segregated in every kind of state, but it was only men. There was women, which is another proof I've given countless times to explain how the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment in no way protects trans rights and women's rights and abortion and all this made up crap, because if it did, you would not need a constitutional amendment to give women the right to vote. And it took like another 50 years to get that. Well, it's included. Obviously, if the 14th Amendment prevents discrimination, like we're told, you would never need a constitutional amendment to give women the right to vote. But when the country was founded, this is again why the Constitution doesn't speak to what the states do with their voting. The states were free to allow whoever they wanted to vote. Again, they can let illegal aliens vote. There's nothing in the Constitution that prevents that. Nothing. If a state wants to let illegal aliens vote, then the state lets illegal aliens vote. There's nothing about it. There's literally no prohibition. There's no prescription. There's neither in the Constitution with regards to how the states want to run their elections. All they have is like time and place for certain federal elections that the states kind of set, and the federal government can come in so they can kind of uniform it up. But as far as who gets to vote, that's just not in the Constitution. That's why they have all those amendments.
Yeah, I could see that happening in my state in Colorado. Our stupid Secretary of the State, which is just this ugly, unimpressive person. But on Twitter, she's always like, retweet if everybody should have the right to vote. And like, that's just like how the depth of it. And then she, before the last election, there was an oopsie that happened that sent out like voter registration cards to a handful of the immigrants who are on a list who maybe get an ID or something, but they're not, citizens yet. And so they basically got the cards and like, oops, we didn't mean to send those to them.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So it's all so goofy.
It's so dumb. I mean, the reality is that if there isn't a very serious criminal punishment for so-called violating the Constitution when you're in government, then any discussion of things not being constitutional is meaningless. What does it matter if, I hear it all the time, conservatives, you listen to their stupid media. This is unconstitutional. That's unconstitutional. The liberals are doing that. Okay, it's unconstitutional. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. What's going to happen as a result of it? Nothing's going to happen as a result. What could happen? Nothing could happen. There's nothing. There's no procedural mechanism. There's absolutely no criminal mechanism. There's no mechanism whatsoever for charging a politician with engaging in so-called unconstitutional behavior. So in other words, the fundamental law of the land can just be violated by the government and its agents anytime. And what happens? Nothing happens. And so it's like, why talk about it being unconstitutional and being a problem, even if you could ever decide what it meant to be unconstitutional? There's absolutely no consequence. There's no consequence at all.
Not, like all the congressional hearings and judicial hearings and all this, like all the lies Fauci told, and all, like nothing happens. Nothing ever happens to these people.
Nothing ever happens to them. It's just they act like, oh, did you see him? Oh, he really got him with that. It's just a fundraising system. They take these clips, they take these excerpts, and they run up to their so-called donators, and they say, look at what he's doing. We have to protect ourselves. And it's a money-raising campaign. So really they should thank all of these liars who appear in front of Congress, gives them an opportunity to look like a tough guy to raise money around it. That's all that actually ever happens. Because, I've been long enough to have seen countless series of hearings and so-called scandals. And everyone's exactly the same, just like you'll see now with the fake COVID scandal hearing and the fake Hunter hearing and the fake FBI. I mean, how much they have to abuse the FOIA system, all the different fraud and lies that went on. What happens? Nothing happens. The same thing during Obama with all the crap they used the IRS to come after people and running guns for money. What happened? Nothing happened. Nothing ever happens. You go back to Bush, you go back to Clinton, you go back to the earlier Bush, you go back to Reagan, you go back. It doesn't matter. Nothing ever happens. And so to continue to talk about the importance of making sure we get our people in there. Okay, well, what are they going to do? Specifically, what are they going to do if they get in? And nobody ever has anything except for hold them accountable. That's just a meaningless Barnum statement. You have to have an actual procedural mechanism that can be used, a specific system to use it, and a person you're going to go after with an outcome you want to get. And there's never anything like that. There's never going to be anything like that. And they make sure that people are simply driven into the hold them accountable, get the country, resave the country, get us back to our roots, all this same nonsense, which just isn't true.
Yeah, it's all bullshit. Nothing. And it just keeps growing. They just keep getting more bureaucracy, levels of bureaucracy, more levels of all this and that. It drives me nuts. I was just to say something that while you were talking. Pax, did you have any questions for it? Other questions for him?
No, not yet. Not yet.
I just could listen to you talk forever. Do you do? I know you do acting. Do you do like voice acting too? Because you easily could.
Well, I've never acted, but I did. I am now an actor because I played Mr. Jones. But no, I've never done any voice work. That's really great. That's really great paying work, but it's really super specialized, and a lot of it's out in LA. But it's so incredibly lucrative that it's really difficult to get into it. I've never attempted to get an agent or anything, but I've done a lot of speaking, of course, during my lifetime with this job I have. And so my job is basically to write things down or to talk to people. And I try to avoid writing things down the last multiple years because it's really a pain in the ass to write stuff down correctly legally. It's very, very time consuming. It's much easier to just explain something to somebody.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to go over. Well, you got an audience with my neck of the woods over here. I don't really know. We could probably call it that if you want to give your plugs.
Paul,
I'm sorry. Did I speak over you?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't have a lot of plugs. I don't usually plug outside. If somebody wants to listen to my podcast, they can. It's called The Quash. If they want to find me, they can just go to Twitter, Legalman at US Crime Review. It's the only social media I'm on. I don't do anything else. So that's the best place.
Twitter's the most like bang for your buck, I feel like. Just with everything that happened in the last 3 years and like how I grew things and the connections I've made, I'm like, I feel like there's like a magic to Twitter.
I like Twitter. I mean, it's got a lot of limitations, but for the way I do it, I like it the most. I don't have anything on Facebook. I don't have personal, professional, nothing. I've tried to post some stuff on YouTube, but it almost always gets removed. My material almost always gets removed. Even little clips people try to put up there, and there's nothing offending about them, but they get removed. I actually use the YouTube account I have to do an internal live show inside Patreon, but I've actually had YouTube go in. These are shows you can't even see. They aren't open to the public. I'll go into YouTube and they'll have removed some of my private shows. It's like they're removing private shows now. It's like, oh, okay. And they threaten me all the time that they'll, cancel I'm like, dude, I'm not even running a channel where I'm putting stuff out to the public. This is literally just a technology platform in order to share with people who want to hear it. And still they delete and remove the shows out of my private library. That's how insane the so-called free market is. And of course, you can look on YouTube and you can see, the vast majority of people who have these large accounts, it's like, how can you talk about this? If you're really like this, if this was like, if I had a show like that, it would be immediately canceled by YouTube. So it's like, how come this person can continue to run an account? And then the question, of course, answers itself most of the time.
Fed. No, just kidding. They're feds. I was just gonna say that. Hex, you want to give your plugs?
Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all of that. Hexcelerate, as you see on the screen. I will finally be returning to my live streams. I'm thinking Friday I'll start it up again because I took a little bit of a break. So subscribe to my YouTube and Rumble for that, and be on the lookout for that.
I was going to say, with all the censorship that was happening, we all still found the truth, like especially with Twitter, like all that censorship and we all still found the right information. So they can keep trying to censor us. But
what's that principle called? It's like the more you try to suppress something, the more popular it gets or whatever.
Right.
Whatever that. I don't remember what it's called, but that's basically what it is.
The more you push against it, there's no doubt they'll just create more of it. It's I think that's one of those sort of semi woo-woo-ish kind of law of attraction things.
Right.
That they put out there that, you're fighting against it, the same thing as giving it attention, and therefore you'll get more of it.
Yeah. My plugs, Forest Mommy on Twitter. Everyone knows, jessicafensky.com. Yeah, that's it. I hope everyone has a great week. And thanks, Mersh Mersh just gave us a $5 thing over in Rumble. Thank you. As right as we're leaving, thanks.
Shout out to Mersh.
Shout out merch. Everyone go follow Nightwave Radio and ROTC. Yeah, that's good. You can take us on out, Paul.